I'm James, 22, and my own brother shoved me into a lake and laughed while I was drowning. Before I tell you how I redirected his entire $50,000 college fund and disappeared without a trace, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I'd love to see how far my story reaches. It was our annual family reunion, held at the lakeside cabin that had been in my mom's family for generations. The air smelled of pine needles and barbecue smoke. Distant relatives I saw once a year were milling around, laughing and catching up. On the surface, it was a perfect picture of a happy American family. But for me, it was just another stage for my family's favorite play, where I was cast in the same role year after year. The reliable, responsible, and utterly invisible younger brother. My older brother, Marcus, was the star of the show. At 24, he was charming, athletic, and had a way of making everyone feel like they were his best friend. Right before he asked them for a favor, he was standing on the edge of the old wooden dock, a can of beer in his hand, telling some exaggerated story to our cousins. I was just walking by to grab a soda from the cooler. "Hey, little bro," he slurred, a smirk playing on his lips. "Thinking about all that money Grandpa left you?" I ignored him, my hand reaching for a cold can. That was his favorite topic. My inheritance. Not our inheritance. Mine. A fact that grated on my family every single day. "Don't be like that," he said, stepping in front of me. I tried to move around him, but he put a hand on my chest. "You know, you're always so serious. You need to loosen up." And then he shoved me. Hard. The world tilted. One moment I was on the solid wood of the dock. The next I was tumbling backward into the murky, shockingly cold water of the lake. The cold was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I came up sputtering, gasping, my hair plastered to my face. My head went under again as I tried to get my bearings. The laughter from the dock hit me before the air did. It was Marcus, doubled over, pointing. "Don't be so dramatic," he howled. My parents, Robert and Diana, were watching from the porch. They were smiling, not trying to help, just watching. As I struggled to breathe, a sharp pain shot through my old shoulder injury, and the familiar tightness of my asthma began to grip my chest. I wasn't being dramatic. I was in real trouble. And in that moment, watching them laugh, I knew something inside me had finally broken. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just fought my way back to the shore, my lungs burning. 2 weeks later, his college fund was gone, and so was I. The drive home from the reunion was silent. I sat in the back seat, wrapped in a damp, musty towel, the car's air conditioning feeling like ice against my skin. The wheezing in my chest had subsided to a low whistle, a constant reminder of how close I'd come to a full-blown asthma attack. Marcus was in the front seat, humming along to the radio, occasionally chuckling to himself. My parents were discussing what they needed to pick up from the grocery store. It was as if the last hour hadn't happened, as if their youngest son hadn't been drowning while they watched. But for me, that hour was a lifetime. The cold of the lake had shocked my system, but it was the coldness in their eyes that had frozen something deep inside me. It dredged up a decade of memories, a long, silent movie of my own life playing out in my head. I remembered being 16, so proud of my first car. A beat-up but reliable sedan I'd bought with money from my after-school job. A week later, Marcus, who had just gotten his license suspended for speeding, took it without asking and wrapped it around a telephone pole. When I found out, my mother pulled me aside, her voice soft and pleading. "He made a mistake, James. He feels terrible. Be a good brother. That money your grandfather is saving for you can cover it, right?" I ended up paying for the damages. Marcus never even said thank you. I remembered my 21st birthday. I wanted to go to a nice dinner with my family. Instead, I spent the night wiring Marcus $5,000. He was in Las Vegas with his friends and had, in his words, hit a bit of a rough patch. My dad clapped me on the shoulder when I got off the phone. "That's my boy. Always responsible. Family helps family." My grandfather, my mom's dad, had seen it all. He was a quiet, observant man who had built a successful construction business from nothing. He saw how I saved my money while Marcus burned through his allowance. He saw how I studied for my exams while Marcus partied. He saw how I was always the one left to clean up the messes. A few months before he passed away, he sat me down in his workshop, the air thick with the smell of sawdust and varnish. He handed me a heavy, leather-bound ledger. "Money is a tool, James," he'd said, his voice raspy but firm. "It can build a life, or it can be a crutch for those who refuse to learn to walk. I trust you to be a builder." When he died, he left the bulk of his estate, a considerable sum including investments and property, to me. Marcus got a token amount and my parents got the family home and a pension. The will was clear. The money was mine, to be managed by me when I turned 21. My grandfather had put his faith in me, not them, and they had never forgiven me for it. The silence in the car was finally broken by my mother. "James, honey, are you feeling better?" I didn't answer. I just stared out the window. "Stop being such a baby," Marcus grumbled from the front. "It was a joke." "Marcus," my father said, his voice holding no real admonishment. "But he's right, James. You've always been too sensitive." I got home, showered, and went to my room. The chill wasn't just in my bones anymore. It was in my heart. I pulled out my phone and called the only person I knew would understand. Michael. We'd been best friends since kindergarten, and he'd been a frontline witness to my family's dynamics for years. "They did what?" he said, his voice a low growl after I recounted the story. I could picture him pacing his small apartment, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "They just laughed, Mike, like it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen." "I'm coming over," he said. He was there in 15 minutes, a bag of greasy burgers in his hand. We sat in my room, and for the first time that day, I felt a flicker of warmth. "This isn't just about the lake, James. You know that, right?" he said, handing me a burger. I wasn't hungry, but I took it anyway. "How many times have you bailed him out? How many loans have you given them that you know you'll never see again?" I just shrugged, picking at the wrapper. "They're not just taking your money, man. They're taking your life. They're disrespecting you because they know you'll just take it. You're their safety net, their get-out-of-jail-free card." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Have you ever, even once, felt loved by them without a condition attached? Without them needing something from you?" His question hit me harder than the cold water. I tried to think of a single instance, a single memory where their affection wasn't tied to my compliance or my wallet. Nothing came. The silence stretched, and it was filled with a terrible, dawning realization. Tears I didn't even know were there started to well up in my eyes. I turned away, not wanting him to see. He pretended not to notice. After Michael left, I found myself pulling out an old photo album. There we were, a family of 4, smiling at Disney World. I was about 10. I remembered that trip. I remembered that my dad had lost his wallet, and I'd offered up the $200 I had saved for a new video game console to help pay for the hotel. My mom had hugged me and called me her little hero. At the time, I'd felt a surge of pride. Now, looking at the photo, all I could see was the beginning of the pattern. I flipped through the pages, each smiling picture a lie. Graduation photos, Christmas mornings, birthday parties. Every milestone was tainted by a transaction, a sacrifice I had made that was expected, not appreciated. I closed the album, a profound sense of grief washing over me. I wasn't just mourning the family I had. I was mourning the family I thought I had, the one I had desperately wanted to believe in. The happy faces in the pictures were strangers, and I was a stranger in my own home. I sat there in the dark, the tears finally falling, crying for the boy in the photographs who just wanted his family to love him for who he was, not for what he had. The next few days were a blur of forced politeness. My family acted as if nothing had happened, which was somehow worse than them being angry. It was a complete invalidation of my experience. My mom would hum as she made breakfast, asking if I wanted eggs. Marcus would ask to borrow my car charger. My dad would ask me to help him with yard work. It was normal, and it was driving me insane. The breaking point, the moment that turned my grief into cold, hard resolve, came on a Thursday night. I was heading downstairs for a glass of water when I heard my parents' voices coming from the living room. I paused at the bottom of the stairs, hidden by the shadows. He's barely spoken a word in 3 days. My mother, Diana, said, her voice laced with frustration. This whole silent treatment thing is so childish. He'll get over it. My father, Robert, grunted from behind his newspaper. He always does. We can't afford for him to get over it right now, Robert, she snapped. Marcus needs the down payment for that MBA program by the end of the month. $50,000. Did you forget? Of course I didn't forget. What do you want me to do? He's an adult. We can't just take the money. There was a pause. Then my mother's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. I was talking to my sister, Carol. Her husband's construction business is having some cash flow issues. A temporary crisis. What if we told James that we were in trouble? That the business was on the verge of collapse and we needed him to co-sign a loan to save it? My blood ran cold. He'd never do it, my dad said dismissively. He would if we framed it right, she insisted. We make it about family, about responsibility. We tell him it's the only way to keep a roof over our heads. We'll get the loan, give Marcus the $50,000, and then, well, we'll figure the rest out later. He has to be responsible for his brother. It's the right thing to do. I felt like I was going to be sick. This wasn't just casual greed anymore. This was a calculated plot. They weren't just taking advantage of my generosity. They were planning to actively deceive me, to trap me in debt to fund my brother's life. I backed away from the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest, and retreated to my room before they could hear me. I closed the door, my back pressed against it, and slid to the floor. It was one thing to be taken for granted. It was another to be the target of a conspiracy hatched by your own parents. The next day, I tried to talk to my girlfriend, Jessica. We'd been dating for about a year. She was smart, ambitious, and I thought she was on my side. We met for coffee, and I laid it all out for her. The lake, the history of financial demands, the conversation I'd overheard. I expected outrage. I expected her to tell me I had to get out of there. Instead, she stirred her latte, a thoughtful frown on her face. Wow, that's a lot, James. A lot? Jessica, they're planning to defraud me. Well, maybe not defraud, she said carefully, avoiding my eyes. Maybe they're just desperate. And it's just a signature, right? For family. You don't want to be the one to break up your family over money. Do you? Think about what people would say. I stared at her, the coffee cup frozen halfway to my lips. What people would say. It wasn't about what was right or wrong. It wasn't about my well-being. It was about appearances. And in that moment, I realized that to her, my inheritance wasn't a burden I carried. It was a feature she enjoyed. The nice dinners, the weekend trips. My financial stability was part of my appeal. My pain was just an inconvenient complication. I have to go, I said, standing up so abruptly that the table rattled. That night, I called Michael again. I told him everything. The plot, Jessica's reaction. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then he said, I know a lawyer, James. My aunt used her for her divorce. She's tough and she's smart. Her name is Sarah Blackwood. I think you should call her. Not to sue them. Just to know what your rights are. To know what you're up against. He texted me her number. I stared at it for a full 10 minutes before my thumb finally pressed the call button. Sarah Blackwood's office was in a sleek, modern building downtown. It felt like another world compared to my family's suburban home. Sarah herself was in her late 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a calm, no-nonsense demeanor. She listened to my entire story without interruption, her pen occasionally scratching a note on a legal pad. When I finished, I felt emotionally drained, like I just run a marathon. She looked at me, her expression a mixture of professionalism and genuine empathy. James, she began, her voice steady and reassuring. First, let's be perfectly clear. The assets your grandfather left you are yours and yours alone. You have zero legal obligation to pay for your brother's education, his car, or his lifestyle. The only obligation you have is the emotional one they have manufactured and exploited for years. Hearing it laid out so plainly, so legally, was like a physical weight being lifted off my shoulders. The plan you overheard, she continued, her tone hardening slightly, is not just morally reprehensible, it borders on conspiracy to commit fraud. If you were to sign that loan under false pretenses they created, you would be legally on the hook, and they know that. We talked for over an hour. We discussed options. We talked about trusts and foundations. We talked about boundaries. For the first time, I wasn't just talking about my feelings. I was talking about strategy. I left her office feeling different. The grief was still there, a dull ache in my chest. But for the first time, it was mixed with something else. A flicker of power, a sense of control. They had pushed me into the lake, expecting me to flail and splash and eventually give in. They had no idea I was about to learn how to build a dam. The 2 weeks after my meeting with Sarah Blackwood were the quietest and most intense of my life. On the outside, I was placid, obedient. I went back to being the James they were used to. I answered my mom's questions about my day. I let Marcus beat me at video games. I even helped my dad clean out the garage. I was playing a role, and I had never been a more convincing actor. Inside, however, a storm was raging. Every polite smile was a mask. Every nod of agreement a carefully placed chess move. I was no longer a victim reacting to their whims. I was an architect designing my own exit. My first move was to test the waters, to confirm what I already knew in my heart. One evening at dinner, I let out a heavy sigh. "I got some tough news today," I said, pushing my mashed potatoes around my plate. "That tech stock I invested a chunk of my savings in took a nosedive. I've lost a significant amount of money." The reaction was instantaneous and telling. My mother's fork clattered onto her plate. "What? How much?" "A lot," I said vaguely, watching their faces. "It's going to take a while to recover. I'll have to be really careful with my finances for the foreseeable future." I saw it. Not a shred of concern for me or my supposed financial loss. Just pure, unadulterated panic. My brother Marcus's face darkened. "You're kidding me, right? What about my MBA? The first tuition payment is due." "I'm sorry, Marcus," I said, meeting his gaze. "I don't think I can help with that right now." "What do you mean you can't help?" My mother, Diana, exclaimed, her voice rising. "You can't just be irresponsible with that money, James. Your grandfather left it for you to build a future, for this family's security, not to gamble away on stocks." The hypocrisy was so thick I could have choked on it. That was the final confirmation. My value to them was not as a son or a brother, but as a bank account, a resource. And now that the resource was supposedly threatened, the thin veneer of familial affection was stripped away, revealing the ugly, desperate greed beneath. The next day, I began to build my arc. I had several more quiet, discreet meetings with Sarah. We laid out the plan. The $50,000 my parents expected for Marcus was sitting in a high-yield savings account under my name. It had always been my money, earmarked in my own mind for his education out of a misguided sense of duty. Now it would be repurposed. Sarah helped me draw up the paperwork to establish a private scholarship foundation. It was a simple legal maneuver. I would donate the $50,000 to this new foundation, which would then award scholarships to deserving students in my local community. We even gave it a name, a final, poetic touch of irony. We called it the Wilson Scholarship Foundation. Wilson was our family name. While Sarah handled the legal framework, I handled the logistics of my escape. I had a degree in graphic design, and I quietly sent my portfolio to several agencies in a city 3 states away. A place where I knew no one, a place where I could be anonymous. Within a week, I had a promising interview lined up over Zoom. A few days after that, they offered me a junior designer position. I accepted on the spot. I found a small apartment online and paid the first month's rent and security deposit from a new bank account I'd opened, one my family knew nothing about. I started packing my things late at night, a box at a time, hiding them in the back of my closet. My most treasured possessions, my grandfather's old tools, my collection of vintage design books, the photos of me and Michael. My real life. One afternoon, I overheard my mother on the phone, her voice tight with stress. She was in the kitchen, her back to me. "I don't know what to tell you, Carol," she was saying. "You'll get your money. I need more time." Robert's deal fell through. We were counting on. "Just give me until the end of the year." So there it was. A seed of the truth. My aunt, the one who was always so sweet to me, was a creditor. Her kindness was just the pressure of a thumb screw, tightening slowly. This wasn't just about getting Marcus ahead. It was about bailing themselves out of a hole they dug with my own aunt. The complexity of their deceit was deeper than I'd even imagined. The pieces were all in place. The foundation was legally established. The job was secured. The apartment was waiting. All that was left was to walk away. My family, oblivious to the tidal wave about to hit them, decided to stage their final act. My mother announced we were having a special family meeting dinner. Her tone was artificially bright, the way it always was when she was about to ask for something big. She made my favorite meal, roast chicken with rosemary potatoes. The whole house smelled of a home I was about to leave forever. We sat at the dining table, the good china gleaming under the lights. It felt like a scene from a movie, a tense family drama playing out in real time. My father cleared his throat. My mother folded her hands on the table, and Marcus leaned back in his chair with an air of entitlement. "James," my mother began, her voice dripping with practiced sincerity. "We need to talk. As a family." I just looked at her, my expression neutral. I'd rehearsed this moment in my head 100 times. "Your father and we've hit a rough patch," she said, a single perfect tear rolling down her cheek. "The business, it's not doing well. We're facing a crisis, and we're in danger of losing everything." My father nodded grimly, playing his part. "We need your help, son. We wouldn't ask if it wasn't a matter of life and death." He slid a sheaf of papers across the table. A loan application, just as I'd overheard. They wanted me to be a guarantor for a massive loan, using my investment portfolio as collateral. "It's just a signature," my mother whispered, her eyes pleading. "To save your family." Marcus chimed in, the final nail in the coffin. "It's time to be an adult, little brother. Time to take on some real responsibility." I looked down at the papers. I looked at their expectant faces. The desperate hope in my mother's eyes. The stern demand in my father's. The arrogant smirk on my brother's. I saw the whole pathetic, tragic play for what it was. And I felt nothing. The anger had burned out, leaving behind a cold, clear calm. I picked up the pen they'd so helpfully placed beside the documents. I held it for a moment. I could see the victory in their eyes. They thought they had won. Then, I gently placed the pen back on the table, untouched. I stood up. "No," I said. My voice was quiet, but it echoed in the suddenly silent room. "What?" my mother gasped. "No," I repeated, a little louder this time. I looked each of them in the eye. "I won't be signing anything." I turned and walked out of the dining room, leaving them frozen in a tableau of disbelief. I went upstairs, grabbed the 2 duffel bags I had packed with my essentials, walked out the front door, got into my car, and drove away without looking back. The real climax didn't happen with a shout, but with a letter. 3 days later, my brother Marcus, confident that my little tantrum was over, walked into the main branch of our local bank. He went to the private client advisor he'd been told to see about setting up the wire transfer for his tuition. He probably walked in with a swagger, expecting a red carpet treatment. He gave the advisor his name and explained he was there to access the funds his brother was providing for his MBA. The advisor, a polite woman in her 50s, typed his name into the system. She frowned. She typed it again. "I'm sorry, Mr. Wilson. I don't see any notes here about a transfer." "It's coming from my brother's account, James Wilson," Marcus likely said, his voice laced with annoyance. More typing. A longer pause. "Mr. Wilson," the advisor said, her voice carefully neutral. "The account you're referring to was closed 2 days ago. The funds were transferred out." "Transferred where?" "That's my money." he would have yelled, causing heads to turn in the quiet bank lobby. The advisor would have calmly explained that the funds were legally in my name and that I had every right to move them. But that wasn't the best part. The next day, a thick, cream-colored envelope arrived at our house, addressed to Mr. Marcus Wilson. It looked official, important. He probably ripped it open, thinking it was some kind of mistake from the bank he needed to rectify. Inside, on heavy, embossed letterhead, was a letter. It began, "Dear Mr. Wilson, on behalf of our board of directors, we are thrilled to inform you that you have been named the honorary inspiration for the newly established Wilson Scholarship Foundation. A generous, anonymous donation of $50,000 has been made in your family's name to provide financial assistance to bright, deserving students in our community who have overcome significant personal and financial obstacles. Your story of ambition has inspired our benefactor to give back to those who demonstrate true potential and self-reliance. I wasn't there to see it, but I can picture it perfectly. The color draining from Marcus's face. My mother grabbing the letter, her hand trembling as she read it aloud. My father sinking into a chair, his face ashen. The money wasn't just gone. It had been used to publicly shame them. It had been repurposed into a monument to their own greed, a permanent, charitable reminder of what they had lost. They hadn't just lost the money. They had lost control. The power had shifted, completely and irrevocably. And I was already 3 states away, starting over. The fallout was immediate and exactly as I had predicted. My phone began to blow up. The first call was from my mother. I let it go to voicemail. The message she left was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. Her voice choked with fake tears. "James, honey, what have you done? There's been a terrible mistake. You need to call us. We're so worried. This isn't you." The next call was from Marcus. I didn't have to listen to the voicemail to know what it said. His text messages, a stream of furious, misspelled words, told the whole story. "Where is my money? You think this is funny? You ruined my life. You are dead to me." Then came a text from my father, curt and cold. "Call your mother. You've upset her terribly." I read the messages, listened to the first few seconds of the voicemail, and then I did something I should have done years ago. I opened my contacts list and, one by one, I blocked their numbers. Mother, father, brother. The sense of relief was a physical thing, a deep, cleansing breath. The silence that followed was beautiful. A few days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. It was my Aunt Carol. Her voice was syrupy sweet. "James, sweetie, it's your auntie. Your mom is beside herself with worry. We all are. Why don't you just come home so we can talk this all out? Whatever is wrong, we can fix it." She was their last-ditch effort, the good cop sent in to mediate. But I knew the truth. She wasn't worried about me. She was worried about the loan my parents owed her. "I'm fine, Aunt Carol," I said, my voice calm and steady. "There's nothing to talk about." "But your family." "They haven't been my family for a long time," I said, and before she could respond, I hung up and blocked her number, too. I knew they wouldn't give up easily. Their next move, as Sarah had warned me it might be, was a desperate, pathetic attempt to use the authorities to control me. One evening, there was a knock on my new apartment door. My heart jumped for a second, but I looked through the peephole and saw 2 police officers. I opened the door. "Can I help you?" "Are you James Wilson?" one of them asked. "I am. Sir, we received a call from your family. They're concerned for your welfare. They believe you may be a missing person." I had to stop myself from laughing. "Officers, I'm 22 years old. I'm not missing. I moved here for a new job. I'm perfectly safe and sound." I showed them my new driver's license with the local address and my work ID. The officer nodded, scribbling in his notepad. "So you've left voluntarily?" 100%, I said. "I would appreciate it if you could inform my family that I am fine, and that I do not wish to have any contact with them. Any further attempts they make to contact me will be considered harassment." They were professional and they understood immediately. They left, and I knew that avenue was now closed to my family. They had played their last card and lost. Their power over me was officially gone. They couldn't force me, couldn't manipulate me, and couldn't use anyone else to get to me. They were left with nothing but the consequences of their own actions, and I was finally, truly free. 6 months passed. 6 months of quiet, blissful, and sometimes difficult healing. My new city was vibrant and anonymous. My job as a junior designer was challenging and fulfilling. I was surrounded by people who saw me as James, the guy who was good with fonts and had a dry sense of humor, not James, the family ATM. I'd made a few friends from work. We'd grab beers after a long week or go hiking on the weekends. They were simple, easy friendships, free from the weight of history and obligation. Most importantly, I was taking care of myself. I found a great physical therapist who helped me work through the chronic pain in my shoulder. With each exercise, I felt myself getting physically stronger, and it was a mirror for the emotional strength I was building. On her recommendation, I also started seeing a therapist. We talked about boundaries, about guilt, about redefining what family meant. It was hard work, unpacking 2 decades of emotional baggage, but it was necessary. One afternoon, an email popped into my inbox with a subject line that made my breath catch. From Lily. Lily was my cousin, Marcus and I's younger cousin. She was 16, a quiet, observant girl who was always on the periphery at family gatherings. I remembered seeing her by the dock that day, her eyes wide with a look I couldn't decipher at the time. I opened the email. Hi James. I don't know if you'll even get this. Mom said no one should contact you, but I felt like I had to. I've been thinking a lot about that day at the lake. I saw what Marcus did, and I saw that you were really struggling. I wanted to say something, but I was scared. I'm so sorry I didn't. Things here have been crazy since you left. Uncle Robert and Aunt Diana are a mess. Marcus lost his spot in the MBA program and is working at a call center. He's angry all the time, but there's something else you should know. The reason everyone was so desperate. I overheard my mom, Aunt Carol, fighting with Aunt Diana on the phone. My dad's business really is in trouble, and my mom had loaned your parents a huge amount of money a while ago. She was threatening to take them to court if they didn't pay her back. They weren't trying to get your money just for Marcus's school. They were trying to save themselves from my mom. It doesn't make what they did right at all, but I thought you should know the whole story. I hope you're okay. I'm really glad you got out. Lily. I read the email 3 times. It wasn't a shock, not really. It was a confirmation of the stray puzzle pieces I had already gathered. It didn't change my feelings, and it certainly didn't make me feel sorry for them. Their desperation didn't excuse their cruelty, but it did provide a final, clarifying lens on the whole ugly situation. It solidified my decision. I hadn't just escaped from greed. I had escaped from a sinking ship, a vortex of bad decisions and desperate measures that would have undoubtedly pulled me under with them. I wrote back to Lily, a short, simple email. Thank you for telling me. It means a lot. I'm doing well. I hope you are too. I hit send, and with it I closed the final chapter on my old life. It's been over a year now. My apartment doesn't feel new anymore. It feels like home. The window over my desk looks out onto the city, a landscape of twinkling lights and endless possibility. My shoulder rarely bothers me now. A dull ache on rainy days is all that remains. Last week, another letter arrived. This one wasn't from a lawyer or a distraught relative. It was on simple, plain paper, the return address from the local community college. I opened it. It was from a young woman, a nursing student. She was the first ever recipient of the Wilson Scholarship Foundation. She wrote about being a single mother, working 2 jobs to make ends meet, and how the scholarship meant she could quit one of them and spend more time with her son. It meant she could afford her textbooks without having to skip meals. It meant she could see a future for herself that wasn't just a daily struggle for survival. I don't know who the anonymous donor is, she wrote at the end, but if you ever have the chance to tell them, please let them know they didn't just give me money. They gave me hope. I folded the letter, a genuine, unforced smile on my face. The ache in my chest that had been my constant companion for so long was gone. In its place was a quiet, steady warmth. I had spent my whole life believing I had to set myself on fire to keep my family warm, only to realize they were standing next to the flames, complaining about the chill. My act of rebellion, born from so much pain and anger, had become an act of creation. The money they saw as their right had been transformed into someone else's second chance. Looking out at the city lights, I finally understood. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to walk away. Sometimes the most loving family isn't the one you're born into, but the one you find, or the one you have the courage to build for yourself, brick by brick, in the quiet peace of your own life. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to make a tough choice to protect your own peace? I'd be honored to read about your experiences. Please, share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what's next.